First of all, thank you very, very much for having me here today. It's my great honor, my pleasure to be here with you. My co-investigators for this project are Dr. William Sledge, who is joining us here today, Michael Rowe, Dr. Michael Rowe, who is also joining us, and Larry Davidson. I'm not sure if he's here, but he's also Dr. Larry Davidson. We have no conflicts. The title of the talk is Cancer Survivorship is Psyche's Quest. And I'll explain that more in a minute, but first I'd like to thank the Yale Cancer Center and the Connecticut Challenge for Cancer Survivorship Research for funding this project, and also my heartfelt thanks to Maggie Gardner and Barbara Poggio, who I promised not to point out during this presentation. My aims in this talk are to report on a mixed methods pilot study of peer-based cancer survivorship. And when I say peer-based, I'm referring to employing people who have had cancer or currently have it, offering support, guidance, and wisdom to those who have been recently diagnosed and their family members. This pilot research, is looking mainly to assess a feasibility with community settings, but also we wanted to find some of the active ingredients and key mechanisms contributing to gains in recovery of self in cancer survivorship. Finally, I'm going to present qualitative data from the study in parallel to the themes of the myth of Psyche and Eros. Unfortunately, time doesn't allow me to go into great detail about this, but still you'll get the thumbnail sketch. Basically, cancer survivorship can be thought of as Psyche's journey after profound trials to regain her Eros, and how this helps her to feel complete once again. Context is Gardner's House. This all took place through Gardner's House, incorporated in 2007. Gardner's House was originally founded by Maggie Gardner, who is also here today, as a cancer support, advocacy, and education resource. It has ties with Hartford's St. Francis Hospital. Gardner's House offers both peer-based interventions and a survivorship referral base to clients, typically for adults of diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds, and often for those with limited income who are in the North Hartford area, which is consistently rated among the poorest and most crime-ridden urban communities within the United States. Participants in this study, therefore, reflect those within our state confronting the effects of cancer and its treatment with the greatest burden of financial hardship and arguably the lowest access to suitable care. Participants, women, about age 57, 6 African American, 1 Caucasian, varied diagnosis, breast, colorectal, ovarian, all diagnosed within the last 5 years. Thanks to Maggie Gardner, I was able to meet these folks through a kind of mediated engagement process, which would involve attending group support meetings, dinners, and meeting individually at agreed upon locations like Burger King within the participants' local communities. In other words, they didn't come to us in a hospital or any other kind of facility. We went out to them. And of course, the only reason they were willing to speak to me, at least at first, was because I knew Maggie. So everyone completed an informed consent, was paid for their time, and completed a qualitative interview, a quantitative one, and a weekly tracking form, which I'll tell you more about now. A selection of quantitative instruments was designed to capture current functioning across psychological, physical, social, and spiritual dimensions. Of course, these instruments have been thoroughly evaluated and shown to be highly valid and reliable. They include the Symptom Distress Scale, pioneered by our own Dr. Ruth McCorkle, Piper Fatigue Scale, Quality of Life Index, Self-Esteem Inventory, and associated subscales. In what ways have your life been affected by cancer? We didn't jump into it quite so directly, but this was the point. And when necessary, we included simple probes to explore social, psychological, physical, and spiritual functioning. The probes were rarely necessary. These folks wanted to tell us their stories. These were the logs kept by participants, and they documented time spent either receiving or providing peer support, any sense of reward in doing so, and also engaging within activities across the domains listed here about over 6 months' time. So let's check out results. Overall, score levels in Table 1 suggest people who are feeling severely distressed by their symptoms and also feeling pretty fatigued. While levels of self-esteem appeared within the mid-range, quality of life levels generally compared unfavorably to those documented for other participant samples. And this was particularly true for the family subscale, which suggests that these folks were in constant discomfort, and they were pretty upset about it and exhausted, and they were not receiving much support at home where you most might hope to find it. On the qualitative end of things, results revealed across participants some shared patterns of experience, specifically with regard to illness and mechanisms of recovery of the self. And here I'll add, when I did my initial analysis of the qualitative data, the story that immediately came to mind was Psyche and Eros. It felt to me more than simply outcomes across dimensions. It told a story, and a very inspiring one at that. Taking some liberties, you could consider Psyche and Eros' story reflecting themes of passion, betrayal, kinship, and redemption, pretty much in that order, or at least redefinition. And here comes the thumbnail sketch that I promised you. In the interest of time, I ask that you read the selected quotes as they're presented on the slides. I won't read them to you, but instead I'll refer back to them. So Psyche was a celebrity in her time. She was considered the embodiment of mortal beauty, a kind of Angelina Jolie of mythic times. She was so popular that even the gods knew about her. I don't know if that's true about Jolie, but and one of them, Eros, fell in love with her and began visiting her during the night, and eventually they got married. Psyche's passions were for her family and for her spouse, Eros. So passions. In this study, passions appeared in two forms. Passions in connections with others, such as family and friends, just like Psyche's. Here it was passion for an adoptive daughter, and also passion for particular activities like fishing or sewing. In both instances, the passion seemed to define who the person was. So Eros, he's a little strange. He doesn't want to be seen, but eventually Psyche wants to see him. I mean, they're married after all. And one night, she takes an oil lamp over to his bedside, gets a good look at him, and he's so good looking, like Brad Pitt, that she stumbles and spills some oil on his face and wakes him up. He's mad. He feels quite betrayed. And he flies out the window, as gods do, leaving poor Psyche behind. Betrayal. The experience of illness can affect passions and also the way a person sees herself. The first quote here describes the betrayal of relationship. The person whose adoptive daughter no longer wants to spend time with her because she has cancer and says she doesn't like sick people. The second quote describes a different kind of betrayal. It's one of the body which suddenly may not be able to do all the things it did before cancer. So two kinds of betrayal, that of loved ones and that of the body. And once again, a person may wonder who exactly she is if she doesn't have the people or activities that wants to find her. So it's Psyche's quest to regain her Eros. Out into the world, she's forlorn but still hopeful. Among several characters she meets along the way is Pan. He's that half-goat gentleman you see in the picture here. And Pan sees she's very upset, and he gives her some advice. And why don't you try winning back your Eros through service? In this case, he means service to Aphrodite. This is Eros' mother, and so Psyche's mother-in-law, and you think your mother-in-law is tough, just no Aphrodite, haha. But Pan's advice is very important here. It's representing a sort of kinship. And participants made it very clear that receiving support and guidance from someone who's had some relevant personal experience appears to foster a sense of reconnection to others, especially after feeling quite alone. Here in the narrative examples, you see that peer-based support is a special kind of relationship with someone traveling a similar path, and that gestures within such relationship, even rather small ones, can have a profound effect, such as the second quote here, the person's love spilling forth for recommending a home remedy for a radiation burn. Kinship. When we extend Pan's advice to be of service, how did it feel from the peer provider's side of things? Well, one participant noted that providing to others diverted focus from one's own difficulties with illness, and in fact offered a sense of respite. In another way, participants showed that in providing support to others, they found their past and present illness-related difficulties serving as tools in helping others, perhaps giving some meaning to their prior hardships. To quote, "It makes them feel better, and it makes me feel better that I'm contributing something to my life, something to their life." So long story short about Psyche, she does a lot of work for Aphrodite, who's very tough, but manages to impress her, and And more importantly, she wins back her eros, her passion, through service. And redefinition, I'll say more about one of the ways in which I believe peer service has helped to prompt a sense of positive redefinition shortly. But these instances right here on the screen, redefinition appears living more in the present, being less materialistic, and maybe a bit more spiritual as well. So I'm going to jump back for a moment to the weekly logs, of which there are about 100 completed. Inferential analyses are limited here by pilot size, of course, though what they show is that receipt of peer services time is positively correlated with pursuit of interests, social activities, and sense of reward. This pattern was even more pronounced for the act of providing peer services, as you see up here. And we'll be considering that more in a moment. But for now, the findings together are certainly in keeping with the qualitative data that we just reviewed. All right, so discussion. We're talking about feasibility. Overall, the feasibility was supported. Participants were recruited, and in fact, in one of the poorest cities in the United States. The sample characteristics describe a population with special needs. It's well documented that persons of African American backgrounds generally have lower health care access and receive lower quality of care as compared to other groups for varied reasons. Limited financial resources serve to broaden these disparities, and it's known that overall cancer age-adjusted incidence rates tend to be higher in urban areas. So as service providers and researchers, these are precisely the people that we most want to reach. Those with the highest burden of illness and the least access to care. So I feel that the resulting data here on this neglected population serves to offset some of the extra time and activity noted within recruitment, which in and of itself is a worthy topic for future research. Second, it should be noted that peer-based programming doesn't always operate according to strict provider or receiver guidelines. That is, the original study design implied that there were persons who provided support to their receivers and persons who received support from their providers. In fact, this research strongly suggests that the relationship between designated providers and receivers is far more fluid. So a methodological implication is that instances of giving and receiving support should be carefully tracked. Okay, so I promised you some mechanisms and ingredients. First, the qualitative results suggested that participants felt comforted through the mechanism of practical support and guidance. Secondly, feeling understood through the mechanism of identification. Such comfort and understanding from others who have shared similar trials and resolutions may have helped foster a retuning of priorities, for example, toward more living in the present, prompted through a greater spiritual perspective. You know, it's easier to move on once you feel understood. This is a psychologist in me. Third, providers noted a sense of respite from self-focus simply through their time and interest in others. And finally, participants' weekly logs and narratives suggested that the mechanism of providing support to others was really quite rewarding for a number of reasons, which I'm going to argue. In my final points, result in a sense of redefinition. But for the moment, let's review some of the points of integration between the quantitative and qualitative results. How does all this fit together? Recall that the quantitative results suggested high levels of distress concerning physical symptoms, a low level of quality of life with respect to family functioning, and finally, reasonably strong positive associations with both receiving and providing support and guidance to others. So the high levels of symptom-related distress noted within the quantitative data on the symptom distress scale in particular helped to explain within participants' qualitative narratives what appeared to be an outpouring of appreciation for the provision of practical support and guidance around symptom resolution. She says, "I'll always love her," and the comfort that it instilled. There's also a strong suggestion that peers are able to provide ready support and guidance in beneficial ways that family members may not, where quantitative results suggest a low quality of family life, and qualitative results show particular appreciation of the support, understanding, and guidance received from peers. A couple of final remarks. This is a quote from the great Billie Holiday, which I stole from Larry Davidson, but we both stole it from Billie Holiday. Working on this study, and especially with folks in North Hartford, impressed me deeply with the need for intervention in this area that's gone largely unaddressed, and that is basic needs. Folks care about nutrition and exercise, and they appreciate speaking with counselors, but when cancer first enters their lives, before considering other things, what they really need is some short-term help paying the rent, help getting some groceries, help watching their children. They need the things in the short term that they were once able to provide for themselves, that they've not been able to determine how to supplement, for example, through entitlements. And my final point. The Psyche's quest is to regain her passions. These were the things that made her whole, and carrying it forward into this study, what was it that helped people to get to that point? Surprisingly, more than anything else, it may have been the act of providing services to others. When Pan tells Psyche that she should try service to others, one of the implications is that she has something of value to offer. Not just despite her hardships, but precisely because of them. Likewise, people in this study remarked, and the quantitative data supported, that they felt best when they were able to provide useful guidance to others. Why is this? One possibility is that providing support for others helps people see themselves a bit differently. Where prior experience that was once felt solely as a traumatic liability, such as persistent pain, scarring from radiation, or depression from lost energy, they could now be felt as experiential tools. Because it was exactly these hardships that enabled them now to communicate true understanding and genuinely helpful guidance to those currently distressed in a way that other providers, however well-intentioned, may not be able to do in quite the same way. People can tell when you've really been there. And it's this transformation of felt liability to asset that may be critical in finding within profound hardship a sense of meaning to once again feel complete. This is among the greatest challenges to surviving cancer. It's Psyche's quest, and it's a way that peer services can help. Thank you very, very much for having me here. It's been my great honor, my great pleasure. Thank you.
Open for questions. So I guess I'll start with one. The wellness community, for many, many years, filled a very important role in providing support groups at discounted fees. In fact, most of them were free for cancer patients. And they also, what they did, they were a national organization, and they also provided support in communities outside of the hospital, so that while they were affiliated with hospitals loosely, they weren't owned by hospitals, and it was a non-medical environment. And that was found to be something that was particularly helpful. Unfortunately, the wellness community has fallen upon tough times financially and is not meeting that need right now. I was struck by the value that peer support or support groups or programs like this provide to cancer patients. Your comments on the state of peer support nationally for cancer patients. Where are we? Who's providing this? And how do we make it better?
Well, you know, it's sort of like a cottage industry at this point. You have places, it's something of a cottage industry at this point. You have places like Gilda's Club, which was originally founded by Gilda Radner's folks, and that provides it, piecemeal throughout the country. But really specifically with respect to this population, it's one that's been neglected. Folks don't necessarily feel like they have much in common with the people at Gilda's house, Gilda's Club, if they're from a community, different socioeconomic status, different racial background, so forth. So it's I have to say it's kind of languishing right now.
Yeah. Are there any places that, does the VA do, for any of the fellows, Chrissy, you're here, does the VA do this particularly well? Do we know? Are there support groups for veterans going through cancer therapy?
I think the VA definitely has a lot more resources, mostly connected to the common bond of being a veteran, and a lot of veterans have cancer, so there are definitely support groups going on all the time. But the VA also has support groups for veterans, heart disease, veterans of diabetes. I think it's just the way it's structured.
Yeah. And Bill, your perception of how well we're doing with support groups, psychosocial support for patients with cancer?
Well, I think we have a lot of opportunity ahead of us, and a lot of places to grow into. We just finished a piece about recovery guides for mentally ill, seriously mentally ill patients who were readmitted to the hospital. And there's a lot here we don't understand that's enormously helpful in curative for a variety of conditions, not just cancer or mental illness. And I think that where we've been in the past is organizations have set up for adventitious and ad hoc kind of groups that have been particularly strong. Where there's a big breast cancer operation, there'll tend to be a breast cancer survivor group and that kind of thing. And so I don't really understand the national implications of it or how it's organized. I think this is largely a local phenomenon that depends in part on local circumstances. But I think it's an area that we have a lot to look forward to in terms of its value and helpfulness to our patients.
And Tara, how are we doing in the care centers? And do you think that in communities outside of New Haven, we're doing better in providing psychosocial support for cancer patients?
Well, I think it's still very regional. Through St. Raphael's, we have the Sister to Sister program, which Andrew Silver is very active in, and we have a prostate program where we use local regional support. So some of the care centers that are hospital-based probably have a little bit more support, whereas the folks in the outlying offices in the care centers are probably still using New Haven as their base. But I think local regionally we can do a lot better. And I think it's a lot of it financial, it's a lot of time volunteer, but probably the most successful program is the breast program with Sister to Sister.
Yeah. And then finally, a question. Do you think there's a gender issue of the people that you studied? What was the gender breakdown?
The gender breakdown was all women.
All women.
Yeah.
Now, is that just luck, or do you think that women are more likely to access peer support? Do you think the same thing would happen if it were a group of guys with prostate cancer?
Women are far more likely to access the support.
Yeah.
Far more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Additional questions? Well, oh, yes.
This is Maggie Gardner.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Dr. Sells, a question for you. How, before and after the study, what did you take away from that study as a researcher, as a professional? Can you tell me pro versus con?
I can't. It's all pro, Maggie. All I can tell you is that I was just so touched that people would share their stories with me, which I think had a lot to do with your facilitation, particularly me, and given my demographic background and the participants in the study and them, and given their demographic background, that they were willing to speak with me at all is an unusual case in this literature. It represented a great opportunity and one I hope that we develop more together.
Thank you for that fabulous presentation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.